Most people go through life believing that losing is part of the game, that being deceived, surpassed, ignored is normal. But what if I told you that this isn't bad luck? It's a lack of strategy. There's a silent psychology that separates those who are used from those who are in control. And no, it's not pretty, nor comfortable. It's cold, calculated, and based on a truth that few dare to face. The world doesn't reward good intentions. It rewards positioning. While you're trying to be understood, someone has already figured out how to read you. While you're reacting to what's happening, someone has already anticipated your every move. And the most dangerous part? You don't even realize it. Now tell me, what if the problem was never a lack of effort, but rather the way you're playing the game? What if everything you've been taught about being good, being fair, waiting your turn, is actually keeping you exactly where you are? Because while you play fair, someone else is playing to win. And there's no middle ground here. Either you learn to think like a king, or you'll continue to be a pawn in someone else's game. But hold on, because what you're about to see isn't cheap motivation or pretty phrases. It's a code, a thought pattern used by those who rarely lose, not because they're lucky, but because they understand the game on a level most people can't even imagine. And from the moment you see that, there's no going back. If something inside you awakened while listening, don't ignore that feeling. This channel isn't about videos, it's about memories. Remember who you were before the fear, before the exhaustion, before the silence. Each new video here is a different reflection of your own soul, an invitation to understand what the world never taught you. The power you seek outside has always been within you. If you feel that this journey speaks to what lives silently within you, sign up now, not to follow yet another creator, but to reconnect with something the world tried to make you forget. Because here, every word was made to heal, each reflection to awaken, and each video serves as a reminder. You are not alone on the path back to yourself. Click on subscribe and turn the algorithm into a daily reminder of who you really are. There's a brutal and almost invisible difference between those who are carried along by life and those who always seem one step ahead. The average person wakes up, reacts to what appears, puts out fires, answers messages, tries to survive the day. But the king, he doesn't react, he anticipates. He understands, as Machiavelli taught, that politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands a cold vision of what hasn't even happened yet. While many are busy dealing with the present, he's already thinking about the future consequences of each move. And that changes everything. Think of someone at work. An average employee waits to receive orders, while another delivers solutions even before being asked. An average investor enters when everyone is already talking about an opportunity. The strategist enters when no one is looking. This is where the real game begins. Anticipating isn't about guessing the future. It's about understanding human patterns, decisions based on real human nature, and acting before the scenario forces you to act. Now, the most interesting thing is that this skill isn't innate. It's built. The king observes more than he speaks, calculates more than he reacts, and learns to see what's behind actions. He understands that the end justifies the means when the goal is to maintain control and predictability. And here's something few realize. Those who anticipate suffer less pressure because they've already prepared. Imagine a student who reviews the material before the exam is scheduled. They don't panic. Or an entrepreneur who thinks about cash flow months before a crisis. They don't go bankrupt. That's virtu and fortuna working together. Preparation meets opportunity. And the more he practices this, the more he realizes that the world isn't chaotic. It only seems chaotic to those who are always behind in their own decisions. The king doesn't seek total control. He seeks advantage. Small, silent, constant. And perhaps the most uncomfortable point is this: living by reacting gives a false sense of movement. A person thinks they are doing a lot, but in reality, they are always playing catch-up, and those who play catch-up never lead. That's why the king adopts a simple principle. He constantly asks himself, what will happen after this? Before sending a message, before accepting a proposal, before trusting someone. He projects scenarios. He understands that avoiding being hated is important, but being predictable is fatal. So he breaks patterns, he moves with intention. And, little by little, he realizes that while everyone else is playing the game of the present, he is already playing the game of the future. And it is precisely at this point that an uncomfortable question arises. If anticipating changes the game so much, why do most people still insist on thinking so small? There's a prison that has no bars, makes no noise, and worse, most people don't even realize they're inside it. It's the prison of thinking small. The average person limits their own decisions before even trying, choosing paths that are too safe, goals that are too modest, dreams tailored to the approval of others. But the king understands that politics guided by reality, not ideals, doesn't mean thinking small. It means thinking strategically big. He knows that whoever projects 10 steps ahead inevitably dominates whoever only sees the next step. Think of it simply. Two professionals start together. One wants to keep their job, the other wants to control the game. Years later, one still asks for permission, the other dictates the rules. It's not talent, it's vision. It's the ability to move beyond immediate logic and see the whole board. But here's a detail that few dare to face. Thinking small isn't a lack of ability. It's fear disguised as prudence. It's the need for approval, the constant attempt to avoid mistakes, to avoid judgment. However, as we already see in the teachings of Niccolo Machiavelli, avoiding excessive risks is not the same as avoiding being irrelevant. The king understands that the end justifies the means when the goal is to escape mediocrity. He is not content with small gains when he sees the potential for exponential gains. A practical example, someone who invests only in what seems safe grows slowly, while another with study and strategy takes calculated risks and accelerates years in months. Another example, someone who creates content thinking, "I'll just post to see what happens," never builds authority. But someone who thinks, "How do I become a reference in this niche?" starts to act completely differently, from the script to the way they position themselves. And the most dangerous thing of all is that thinking small becomes a comfortable habit. People start justifying their limitations. It's not the right time. I don't have the resources. I'm not ready yet. But the king has already understood something essential. Constant adaptability is what separates growth from stagnation. He doesn't wait for the ideal scenario. He creates an advantage within the imperfect scenario. He accepts that not every decision will be perfect, but understands that not deciding is always worse. And little by little, he expands his field of action, his tolerance for risk, his capacity for vision. Because deep down, he knows that the game was never about security. It was always about positioning. And this is where a new level of the game emerges, because thinking big without knowing how to read people can be the most expensive mistake of all. There's a mistake that practically everyone makes, trusting too much in what people say. Words are easy, malleable, convenient. The average person listens and believes. The king observes and interprets. He understands, as Niccolo Machiavelli taught, that decisions based on true human nature require a coldness to see beyond the appearance of virtue. Because, in the real game, what people show is almost always an edited version of who they are. And here's the turning point. While many try to convince, the king tries to decipher. He pays attention to what is not said, The tone of voice, the response time, the micro discomforts, the subtle contradictions. He knows that the end justifies the means when the goal is not to be manipulated. And this completely changes how he positions himself in relationships, whether personal, professional, or strategic. Now let's put this into practice, because this is where the game starts to get interesting. Imagine a negotiation. The other person says they are totally comfortable with the proposal, but avoids eye contact and takes a long time to answer specific points. The average person accepts and moves on. The king notices the misalignment. Or think of someone who always promises but never delivers. Loud words, weak actions. The king doesn't confront immediately, he registers. Long memory. Another simple example. Someone who constantly speaks ill of others but shows loyalty to you. The king understands the pattern. It's not about others, it's about behavior. He learns to identify consistency instead of discourse, and little by little, he builds a mental map of the people around him. Who is trustworthy? Who is opportunistic? Who is predictable? Because ultimately, the calculated use of force doesn't begin with action. It begins with the precise reading of human terrain, and perhaps the most uncomfortable thing of all is accepting this. Most people don't lie out of strategic malice, they lie out of emotional convenience. To avoid conflict, to look better, to protect their own image. And that's exactly why the king avoids being hated, but is never fooled by appearances. He maintains a controlled emotional distance, observes patterns over time, and understands that trust isn't given, it's built with consistent repetition. He doesn't cling to first impressions, nor to pretty speeches. He silently gathers data. Because while many are busy trying to be understood, he is busy understanding. And it's at this point that something curious happens. When you start reading real people, you realize that speaking less can give you much more control than speaking too much. There's a common misconception that whoever talks the most dominates the most, but in practice the opposite is true. Those who talk too much relinquish power. Those who talk less control the environment. The average person feels the need to fill the silence. They over-explain, over-justify, and constantly try to convince. The king, however, understands that silence is a strategic tool. He knows that politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands presence, not noise. In a meeting, for example, while everyone else discusses and tries to prove their points, he listens, he observes, he analyzes, and when he finally speaks, his words carry weight. Because they are infrequent, they are precise. As Niccolo Machiavelli said, the appearance of virtue can be constructed, and silence, when used well, builds authority effortlessly. Now, in practice, this completely changes the social game. Imagine someone who, instead of responding immediately, pauses. 2-3 seconds of silence before speaking. It seems simple, but it creates tension, and tension generates attention. Another example, someone makes a provocation or criticism. The average person reacts immediately, defends themselves, explains, exposes themselves. The king, he holds back, he observes, he allows the other to reveal more, because he knows that the end justifies the means when the goal is to obtain information. And silence does exactly that. It creates space for the other to speak more than they should. Another important point, in negotiations, whoever speaks first usually loses an advantage. Whoever maintains silence forces the other to fill the void, and often to concede more than intended. This is the calculated use of force in its most subtle form. And the most interesting thing is that silence is not the absence of action. It's invisible, strategic action. It allows the king to control the rhythm of the interaction, avoid being emotionally manipulated, and maintain control over his own state. Because deep down, Those who talk too much reveal intentions, insecurities, expectations. Those who master silence, however, maintain mystery, and mystery generates respect. They avoid being hated, but also avoid being predictable. And over time, they realize they don't need to compete for attention. Attention naturally comes to them. But there's an even deeper detail here. Sustaining silence requires a strong, stable mind, immune to the need for approval. And that's exactly where we enter the next level, because controlling the external is easy. The real challenge is building a mind that no one can touch. There comes a point where external influences lose their power and internal influences take over, because in the end, it's not what happens outside that defines the outcome, it's how you react internally. The average person is easily destabilized. A criticism changes their mood, a rejection alters their direction, an external opinion redefines their identity. But the king builds something different, a mind that cannot be invaded. He understands that decisions based on true human nature begin with mastering one's own nature. And here come the 4 silent pillars that support this structure: emotional detachment, strategic patience, elimination of the need for approval, and long memory. It's not about being cold, it's about being stable. It's about understanding that politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands internal control before any external control. The first pillar, emotional detachment, is perhaps the most difficult and the most liberating. The king doesn't cling to immediate results, nor to people, nor to scenarios. He understands that everything is transient. This doesn't mean a lack of feeling, it means an absence of dependence. A practical example: someone criticizes your work. The average person takes it personally. The king analyzes. Is there truth in it? If so, he adjusts. If not, he discards it. Simple. The second pillar, strategic patience, is what prevents impulsive decisions. He knows that the end justifies the means when the goal is to build something lasting. He doesn't react emotionally. He waits for the right moment. Have you ever seen someone miss a great opportunity by acting too quickly? The king hasn't. He knows how to wait. The third pillar, eliminating the need for approval, completely changes behavior. Because while you seek acceptance, you are manipulable, and whoever is manipulable controls nothing. And then comes the fourth pillar, long-term memory. This is the silent differentiator. The king observes patterns over time. Who was loyal, who failed, who changed their behavior under pressure. He doesn't forget. He records. Not out of resentment, but out of strategy. Because trust for him is mathematics, not emotion, and little by little, this architecture creates something rare, a mind that doesn't react, doesn't beg, doesn't over-explain, a mind that chooses. And when you reach that level, something changes in your positioning. People notice, they feel it, they respect it, because there's a different energy in someone who can't be shaken. But here's the detail: having a strong mind is only half the game. Because true kings don't just control themselves, they control their environment without anyone noticing. There is a type of power that doesn't appear, but dominates everything. The common man tries to control through visible force, authority, imposition, direct confrontation. The king, however, understands something more sophisticated. True control happens without others realizing they are being led. This is where the Machiavellian game comes in. Inspired by the logic of Niccolo Machiavelli, he understands that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, requires mastery of 4 invisible elements: framing, obligation, information flow, and patience. And the most interesting thing is that none of this depends on brute force. On the contrary, the calculated use of force here is minimal, because control has already been established before the action even takes place. The king doesn't react to the game. He defines the rules without announcing that he has done so. The first element is mastery of framing. Whoever defines the context defines the outcome. Imagine a negotiation. Instead of asking, "What do you think?" the king presents, "These are the two viable options. Do you see the difference?" He limits the field of decision-making. Another example, in a group, whoever introduces a topic already directs how it will be discussed. The second element is obligation. Small favors create strong bonds. The king understands that by generating emotional or practical debt, he increases his influence without having to demand anything directly. The third element, control of the flow of information, is perhaps the most powerful. He knows what to reveal, when to reveal it, and above all, what to conceal. Because information is power, but filtered information is control. And finally, patience as a weapon. He is not in a hurry. He knows that the end justifies the means when the goal is to consolidate his position. While others rush for quick results, he builds silent dominance. And here comes the part that few can accept. This game is already happening, with or without you. People are constantly influencing, framing, testing limits. The difference is that most do it unconsciously. The king does it deliberately. He avoids being hated, maintains an appearance of virtue, but never loses control of the board. He understands virtu and fortuna as complementary forces, skill and opportunity, and uses both to always position himself one step ahead. And over time, he realizes something almost uncomfortable. It's not necessary to control people to influence them. It's enough to understand how they work, but this opens a new layer to the game, because even with control, reading and strategy, there is a variable that can never be ignored. There's a silent expectation that destroys many people, the idea that loyalty is the norm. It isn't. Loyalty is the exception. The average person is surprised by betrayal, disappointed, and feels wronged. But the king, he calculates. He understands, as Niccolo Machiavelli taught, that decisions based on real human nature require accepting the uncomfortable. People change when incentives change. It's not personal, it's structural. Therefore, politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires predicting human behavior in scenarios of pressure, scarcity, and opportunity. The king doesn't ask, "Would this person betray me?" He asks, "Under what conditions would it become advantageous for them?" And this is where everything changes, because he stops trusting blindly and begins to structure relationships where betrayal simply doesn't pay off. Now let's put this into practice, because this is one of the most applicable points of all. Imagine a society or partnership. The common man trusts in his word. The king creates mechanisms, clear contracts, aligned division of interests, well-distributed incentives. He understands that the end justifies the means when the objective is to protect the structure. Another example. In a team, instead of relying on goodwill, he creates systems where each person gains more by collaborating than by competing internally. In other words, he doesn't try to change human nature. He uses it to his advantage. Another important detail, he never concentrates too much power in a single person. He distributes influence because excessive concentration creates risk, and poorly calculated risk becomes vulnerability. This is the calculated use of force in its most intelligent form. It's not reacting to betrayal, it's preventing it from happening. And perhaps the coldest and truest point is this. For the king, trust isn't a feeling, it's a probability. He observes patterns, tests limits, assesses consistency over time, long memory. He avoids being hated, but never puts himself in a position of absolute dependence, because dependence is weakness in disguise. And little by little, he builds an environment where even potential enemies become predictable, because the problem was never the existence of enemies. The problem was always not knowing where they were. And when you start to see that clearly, something changes inside you. You stop being emotionally vulnerable and start to become structurally strong. But there's one last step, because predicting betrayal and avoiding risks isn't enough. At some point, you need to become someone no one even considers confronting. There is a subtle but decisive difference between appearing strong and being impossible to manipulate. The common man tries to demonstrate power. He speaks loudly, imposes his presence, reacts intensely, but the king, he becomes dangerous in silence. And here, dangerous doesn't mean violent. It means unpredictable, stable, impossible to destabilize. He understands, as Niccolo Machiavelli already taught, that politics guided by reality, not by ideals, demands a presence that doesn't need to prove anything. Because those who need to prove something still depend on external validation. The king doesn't. He has already eliminated that need. And this creates a curious effect. People begin to measure their words, adjust their behavior, respect limits, even if he doesn't say anything directly. But this condition doesn't arise from nothing. It's built with discipline. The first point is absolute emotional control. It's not the absence of emotion, it's mastery over it. Imagine someone trying to provoke you. The average person reacts. The king observes. He knows that the end justifies the means when the goal is to maintain an advantage. Reacting impulsively is losing control. Another essential point is behavioral consistency. The king doesn't change his stance easily. He's predictable in principle, but unpredictable in action. This creates respect. A practical example, someone who never accepts disrespect, but also doesn't engage in unnecessary confrontation. He chooses when to act, and when he acts, it's definitive. This is the calculated use of force. It's not about the quantity of actions, it's about precision. Few movements, high impact. And perhaps most importantly, the king doesn't seek to be feared superficially. He seeks to be impossible to ignore. He understands the principle, better to be feared than loved, but he also knows that avoiding being hated is strategic. So he balances presence and control. He doesn't threaten, he doesn't show off, he doesn't need to prove anything. But there's something about him that makes it clear, crossing certain lines will have consequences. And that completely changes the dynamic around him, because deep down, people don't respect those who talk the most. They respect those who demonstrate that they can't be broken. And when you reach that level, the game changes again, because now it's no longer about surviving or protecting yourself. It's about building something that lasts beyond the immediate. And that's exactly where few manage to play, because it requires thinking about something that most never consider, the long term. There's a silent trap that ensnares most people, the obsession with the short term. Quick results, immediate validation, instant rewards. The average person lives in short cycles. Today they win, tomorrow they lose, then they try to recover. And so it goes. But the king plays a different game. He thinks in decades, not days. He understands, as Niccolo Machiavelli taught, that politics guided by reality, not ideals, requires strategic patience and long-range vision. Because true power isn't in winning a dispute. It's in positioning oneself so that victory becomes inevitable over time. And this completely changes how he makes decisions. He doesn't ask, will this work now? He asks, does this build something that will still benefit me in 5, 10, 20 years? Now bringing this to the real world, because here's one of the greatest competitive advantages someone can develop. Imagine two people. One seeks quick money, the other builds assets. One trades time for immediate results, the other invests time in something that grows on its own. Over time, the results become absurd. Another example, someone who changes strategy every week because they don't see immediate results. versus someone who maintains consistency for months, years, adjusting only what's necessary. Who do you think builds real authority? The king understands that the end justifies the means when the goal is permanence. He accepts the discomfort of slow progress because he knows that exponential growth comes later. This is virtu and fortuna in action, constant discipline, finding accumulated opportunities. And here's something essential. He doesn't get distracted by small victories nor despair over momentary losses. He maintains focus on positioning. And the most interesting thing is that the long game demands something few possess: psychological resilience. Because while you build in silence, the world seems to reward those who make noise, and that tests anyone. But the king has already understood. An appearance of virtue may deceive in the short term, but only consistency builds true dominance. He avoids being hated, maintains his image, but doesn't negotiate his strategy for momentary approval. He knows that the calculated use of force also means knowing when not to act, and little by little, he becomes almost unavoidable. Because while others enter and leave the game, he remains. But there is one last step, because understanding all this changes nothing until a decision is made, and that decision is irreversible. There's a quiet moment in everyone's life when they realize something is uncomfortable. Continuing as they are is also a choice. The average person postpones decisions, negotiates with themselves, promises changes they never keep. But the king understands that real transformation doesn't happen gradually. It begins with a cold, irreversible decision, a cut, a point of no return. As Niccolo Machiavelli taught, politics guided by reality, not ideals, demands action aligned with intention, not emotion. And here comes the hardest principle of all. The end justifies the means when the goal is to break with one's own limited version. Because deep down, nobody changes while still keeping doors open to return to what they were before. But this decision isn't emotional. It's strategic. It's not about motivation. It's about positioning. The king doesn't wait to feel ready. He understands that readiness is built after the action, not before. A practical example: someone decides to stop accepting disrespect, not gradually, not when it feels right, but immediately. Another decides to take full responsibility for their own life, without blaming context, people, or the past. And that changes everything. Because decisions based on real human nature take into account an uncomfortable truth. If there's room to retreat, you will retreat. So the king eliminates that space. He creates public commitments, changes the environment, alters routines, cuts out distractions. He understands virtue and fortune as a consequence of consistent action, not as luck. And most importantly, he stops negotiating with his own weakness. And here's the point few dare to accept: no one becomes powerful without losing something in the process. Comfort, approval, old versions of themselves. The king understands the principle, better to be feared than loved, but applies it internally first. He becomes someone his own mind respects. He avoids being hated externally, maintains an appearance of virtue, but internally, he is non-negotiable. And from that moment on, everything changes, because it's no longer about learning, consuming content, or understanding strategies. It's about acting, and acting definitively, because the game has always been available. But few choose to truly enter it. And now the question ceases to be theoretical. It becomes personal. Are you going to keep reacting? Or are you going to decide once and for all to take control? Now let me ask you a direct question. How many times have you realized you were being reactive and yet continued acting the same way? How many decisions have you made based on emotion, approval, or fear instead of strategy? Because the truth is simple and uncomfortable. Nobody takes control of their own life without first accepting that they were living on autopilot. And there's no romanticizing this. Either you start applying this, or everything continues exactly the same. Think about it. Are you going to keep waiting for the right moment? Or are you going to start creating it? Are you going to keep trusting blindly? Or are you going to start structuring your relationships intelligently? Are you going to keep reacting to what happens? Or are you going to anticipate and dictate the game? Because deep down, you already know the answer. The difference now is something else entirely. It's whether you're going to act differently or just keep understanding, consuming, agreeing, and not changing anything. And perhaps the most important question of all is this: who have you become to survive this far? And even more so, are you willing to let this version die in order to truly take control? Because the game doesn't change when you learn. It changes when you decide, when you cut, eliminate, reposition. When you stop negotiating with your own weakness and start acting like someone who knows exactly what they're doing. So now it's up to you. If something here resonated with you, bothered you, or made sense to you, don't ignore it. Use it. Apply it. Test it. Because knowledge that doesn't translate into action leads to frustration. And if you want to continue learning how to think, act, and position yourself at a level that most never reach, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because here, you don't learn to play better, you learn how to stop being played.